Hello from Why Jesus. This is another edition of Freeform Something. Now, I don't actually have a topic pre-selected for you today. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to stop. Because I know there are some things I want to tell you about. Freeform Something. So lately I've been thinking about this one topic, which does come under the umbrella of Why Jesus. Just had to adjust my camera tripod there. That's a bit better. Okay. No. Yep, okay, fantastic. Now, happy Australia Day, first of all. It's not a very good tripod. That's not tight enough. Okay, that should do it. Yep, okay, a bit more. Okay, there we go. Yep, that's better. Okay, yep, fantastic. Alright, yeah, so where was I? Happy Australia Day. Happy Australia Day. Just checking if my flatmate was on the pergola there. Alright. So, there was something I really wanted to talk about. It comes under the Why Jesus umbrella. Well, last time I did talk about if life looks like it was designed because it was designed. Because it was designed is my hypothesis. But naturalists and people like me both accept that life looks like it was designed. But we have different hypotheses or different explanations for why, to explain why life looks like it was designed. Now, maybe you've heard of Occam's razor, which is basically summarized by the simplest or most straightforward explanation should be preferred over a more complicated explanation if it actually explains the data. Now, or in other words, if it looks like a duck, if it smells like a duck, let's conclude it probably is a duck. So if we take that logic to the data here that we're looking at, which is humans are incredibly complex. Look at that dexterity. Okay, we got eyes that can see, right? That can diffract light into the back of our eyes so that we can see. We've got lenses in our eyes, right? Something that humans learnt and which inspired us to make the camera, right? A work of intelligence, the camera, right? So human beings, another great example. I love this example. If we fall down and graze some skin off our elbow, the skin grows back. That is incredible. Not even robots can do that yet. Okay, so human beings are incredibly complex, allowing us to accomplish a whole host of functions, right? and obviously there's great diversity and function there, and obviously a lot of things that we all hold in common, like, you know, our heart beating. Our heart beats. We don't have to tell our heart to beat. It's just there beating our blood around our body, right? Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible? Like, where's the code, right? It's like ChatGPT, right? The reason why it can answer your query is because it's been coded to do that, right? So the code where's the code? We can't see the code, right? Of course, we know the code, it's DNA. So we can't see it, but we need a microscope. But even then, we don't have everything figured out. It's just, so life, and that's just humans, right? Like, I mean, even if you go to the smallest living cell, you have something incredibly complex, because how do I say that? Well, just go back to your high school biology class. What do we know about what happens in the cell? Okay, we know that, first of all, this cell produces energy. So there are certain, like, organs in that cell, or organelles, that are responsible for energy production, right? So I'm talking about mitochondria. Or what else? So your cell can replicate itself. A single cell can replicate itself, right? And become multicellular, yeah, of course. But let's focus on single cell. Okay, look at the fact that because of not the skin, sorry, that's the word I'm looking for, the boundary, the cell membrane, this cell is protected from substances, and then from the atmosphere, from the environment. It maintains its integrity, right? For example, if it's surrounded by water, it still maintains its integrity. This single-celled thing, right? It stops water from coming in, too much water. Of course, one of the things we've observed about life, right, is that we need water. And so this cellular membrane, or encasing exterior, seems to be designed with this function of letting in only certain amounts of substances that it needs. So only certain amounts of moisture, for example, only certain amounts of oxygen, and releasing only certain amounts, for example, carbon dioxide. Because even living cells, even single-celled organisms rather, respire. This is another thing we know about life. All life respires. And this respiration process is actually linked to the creation of energy as well in the cell. So even if you go to what we think right now is the simplest form of life, right? It's incredibly complex. And nobody's telling this cell, nobody that we can see is telling this cell to do what it's doing. All the functions that it needs to do, all the functions that we've studied in science, we know that life needs to do in order to exist. So, my explanation, people like me, we say life was designed, right? Just like this camera, just like that robot, just like ChatGPT, right? But you've got naturalists who hijack science in the 1800s, right? they don't want us. They don't accept that hypothesis. Why? Because they don't want to accept God has anything to do with life or with them. Why? Because they're like that. So they come up with another hypothesis. Simple organisms evolve into more advanced organisms. And all the organisms that we see now were derived from a common ancestor organism. Or in other words, molecules to man, or mud to monkey to man, pond scum to people. Okay, and they look at the fossil record, right? And they see similarities. Between the skeletons of what they call humans and the skeletons of what they call prehistoric humans, or somewhere between man and monkeys, right? Of course, similarities doesn't necessarily mean descent, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you go to a carpentry owner, business owner, who makes kitchens, and you go to his display site and you see 2 kitchens there among 5. They look similar. One kitchen did not evolve into the other randomly and mindlessly. No, they were both created at different moments in time. Alright, well, they were both created independent of each other. Of course, ideas can evolve, right? But the actual manufacturing, the creation of these kitchens was entirely independent of each other. But they look similar because they were designed by the same designer, alright? So one explanation, another alternative hypothesis of similarities in life is common designer, not common ancestor, common designer. Now, you see, we're looking at the same evidence. See, how can you say one hypothesis is better than the other in this way? Well, I told you about common. We spoke about Occam's razor. That's one way, right? The simplest answer is often, in other words, the correct one. Often, right? But another way we can compare hypothesis is basically seeing if this hypothesis fits into what we already believe. Now, you can see, if you're a naturalist, you're going to reject the common designer hypothesis, and you're going to be more willing to accept the common ancestor or evolutionary hypothesis. What determines our assumptions, what we already believe? What determines that? More hypothesis? What determines that? Just assumptions. Unprovable. Unprovable. So I know what I said to you just now is a bit conflicted. Because on the one hand, I'm saying, yes, you can sort of rank hypotheses, right? These kind of hypotheses. Remember, we're dealing with history, not dealing with objective science like, Louis Pasteur and spontaneous generation in a flask. The swan neck flask experiment. We're not dealing with stuff like that. We're not dealing with stuff like how strong iron is compared to aluminium. No. We're dealing with how things today came about. We're looking back into history, and there's no way, unless we have recorded history up to a certain point. If we go beyond recorded history, then we have to assume that certain aspects of the environment were either like they are today as we see them, or as they have been recorded, or not, but we can't prove it. See, modern science, I'm not talking about the scientific method, I'm talking about modern science, which delves into history and extrapolates beyond current processes. Modern science grapples with these assumptions. And if the people who are making assumptions are naturalists, of course they're going to promote these hypotheses which try to explain why everything in life looks like it was designed. Because so many things in life are beautiful, so many things in life are complex, marvelous, incredible works of art. The way a cheetah runs, right? No faster land animal, to my knowledge. The way a bird flies gracefully through the air, with its wings, right? How long have we had airplanes and helicopters? Yet it's already in nature. It was already in nature. Naturalists don't want to accept that there is a God because they just don't. Now, you see, when I say God, in this context, I'm talking about the designer of life, the creator of life. So, you can call him God if you want. You don't have to call him God. But I would have you know that the God of the Bible claims to have created life. And his Son claims to have been the one through life was created. Maybe working in tandem. Without him, without the Son, nothing was made that was made. You can go to John chapter 1 to look at this. The Gospel of John. But let's put agency to one side. So, although that's something we have to revisit, there is a creator, is what I'm saying. And I'm saying that's the best explanation for why life looks like it was designed. why life is so complex, why life is beautiful, why we seem to have this sense of right and wrong, that at a basic level there is overlap. That's why humans work together. That's why we appeal to right and wrong in the face of apparent strength or brute force or whatever, or survival. In a world that's just material, what are ethics? What's loyalty? What's selflessness? In a world that's just material, that's just survival, it's nothing. But we, as human beings, seem to have an innate appreciation of these things, of morality, natural law. So this is another thing, another piece of data, right, that can be explained with that hypothesis. A creator a good creator, or a creator who defined these laws of right, wrong, put these laws in the hearts of man, in the hearts of man, of men and women, because he wanted us to live by them. Okay, so if you go to the evolutionary hypothesis, how do you explain morality? You can't explain it. You can't explain it in the context. You can't explain it in the context of absolute right and wrong. You can't. You can only say that morality, really, if everything is just about if there's no spiritual, there's only material, if there's only physical, and there's nothing aphysical, then we're just bags of protein. And there can't be any ideals. There can't be any noble ideals. What is nobility? It's nothing. It's abstract. Abstract, if there's only physical, or abstract becomes meaningless. That's a better way to put it. And if physical things, for some reason, are considering these abstract notions, it's to promote their survival. But what is survival as well? Because that's an ideal, that's an abstract ideal as well. If we survive or not, it's irrelevant, because there is just physical. So now go back to the data. So if that hypothesis is true, well, that means that we have to accept that mass genocide of people, like what Hitler did, is never right or wrong. Because everything is physical. Even Hitler had an ideal. His ideal was bettering the German race, or the Aryan race, right? But you can't even have ideals if everything is physical, because an ideal is not physical. If we survive or not, what is progress? It's just physical. If everything physical came about just by chance, right? There was no point to it then. That's what that means. There was no point to life coming about. So whether we survive or not doesn't matter. It's not significant. Now, so does that make sense to you when you think about it? Like what, in other words, what Hitler did is nothing wrong with it. What people do, there's nothing wrong with it. Because there's no right and wrong. There's no absolute right and wrong. Because we're just physical. What you define as right and wrong is the same as what someone else defines as right and wrong. Or if you want to, promote your self-interest, right? Or society wants to promote self-interest. They'll say this is right and this is wrong, right? It's not that it matters. Not that survival matters, right? As an ideal. Does that make sense to you? There's nothing wrong with being like Hitler or being like Gandhi. Are you saying it's meaningless? Does that make sense to you? If it doesn't, well then that's evidence that the data, right? We're looking at life in this case. We're looking at morality, perception of morality within human beings. Well then, this is not adequately explained by the evolutionary hypothesis, which basically tries to explain away God by its very intention. That's what naturalists wanted. They wanted an alternative explanation. Because for thousands of years, all humans appreciated inside, based on their experience, based on what they saw around them, the world, that life was designed by a creator. And a lot of them called this creator God, right? And I believe in this God. So that's another way to compare hypothesis, is to see if that hypothesis explains other pieces of data. So expand the data set, really. Expand the data set and see which hypothesis continues to provide great explanatory power. So I just want to go back to that morality thing, because this is what evolutionists always say. They say it's just for survival. By being nice, by helping others out, they will want to help you out. And so we're all doing it for survival, right? But of course, if it's not in your interest to help someone out, right? If it's not in your interest to help someone out, does that make it alright to commit genocide, to murder, to steal, all of these things? You see, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. I mean, but only you can answer that question. When I look within myself and I think, is it okay to murder my next door neighbors because I'm hungry? No, of course not. It doesn't, or, you see what I'm saying? So, we're beginning to see how the intelligent designer hypothesis, or the God hypothesis, makes better sense of the data. Alright, peace, I'm out.